Patty, great episode today. Chargebacks, you could think it's a boring topic, but boy, it's a topic that impacts our merchants so big. And a lot of people in our industry really don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and it's not just it's not just the merchants, but the ISOs and the agents
Yes,
get impacted. I mean, if
absolutely.
your merchant's running up a lot of chargebacks, there's even the possibility he or she can lose their ability to accept credit cards. Then you're losing a customer outright. And
Absolutely.
having a solution that can help them, as Colin explains, does more than just address the physical or the momentary chargeback. It's the whole culture that
Right.
leads to chargebacks. So
Absolutely. And then tell us about the insiders report.
this EMV thing just keeps on it's the news that keeps on giving.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're talking about some really interesting statistics on EMV compliance at gas stations. And then your questions in the field was really hot this week.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So we talked about, creating a narrative. How do you create urgency? And I talk about storytelling. So if you're having trouble, you're getting people that are interested, but you're just not getting them over the finish line, especially larger merchants. I talk about creating a narrative of urgency and how to really implement that in the sales process. So I think we got a lot of great content to share with you today. Patty, I'm ready to jump in if you are.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Hey, everybody. James and I are here today with Colin Eddy of Chargeback Gurus. Colin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Patty. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks, James, as well.
Yeah, good to have you.
It's awesome. This is one of those really thorny topics, so we always love somebody who can come and talk about it with us. But before we get started, Colin, I'd love to get your backstory. What brought you to merchant service, merchant processing, merchant services in general, and Chargeback Gurus in particular?
Yeah, I was starting out actually at a small company that ran logistics, actually did check clearing for a lot of major banks. And that was in the early 2000s. There was a pivot to image capture. So check clearing was a thing of the past. And that business really fell on its face very quickly, kind of overnight. And we were left with a decision on how to pivot and really make a profit and grow the business and keep a lot of the great people that we had really, built relationships with that were our employees, employed with the company. Mm-hmm. And so in order to do that, we took our existing kind of lines of operation and started to open up some payments there and, going direct to consumer. So that was my first foray into payments is really setting that company up with its own merchant account and own, credit card processing abilities. And then I went on from there just to B2B SaaS telecom solutions, and where I met a great gentleman, Marty Williams, the VP of Business Development for Chargeback Gurus. Right. And at those companies, I had done partner alliance and channel management with a lot of ISVs, VARs, MSPs. And so Chargeback Gurus really had a focus towards providing, excellent service and an excellent partner program. Mm-hmm. And that was a resource they were investing in. So they brought me on back in January of 2020 to spin up the partner program and really take off with engaging ISOs, engaging the partner channel, and creating a program that really, made a difference. And that's what really brought me to Chargeback Gurus is primarily because I believed in the product. I believed in the solution, recognizing that, we were here doing work that was really benefiting the end merchant, because I had been that small business owner, small business manager before. And I know how difficult it is to really have your life and all the people that work for you have their lives in your hand. Mm-hmm. So when you're impacted by something that really impacts the business and the bottom line and your ability to grow, that's a real crippling effect that it can have. And so Chargeback is obviously addressing that. It just seemed like a fantastic opportunity. And since I've been with the company, it really has been an eye-opener, just the focus that the co-founders have, Shri and Suresh, on giving back to their community, providing services and things to the people that work here at Chargeback Gurus. So all of that really made a difference and really helped me make a very clear decision to come and join Chargeback Gurus.
That's awesome. So, today we're talking about chargebacks, obviously. I think our audience as a general rule is pretty familiar with what they are. But for those that maybe are not, could you start out by just kind of zooming out a little bit for us, Colin, and tell us what is a chargeback? And then maybe dig a little deeper into, are there certain business types that are more likely to get chargebacks, certain types of transactions? So if you can kind of just zoom out and give our audience a quick view of what are chargebacks and how they work. And then I know Patty has some additional kind of more detailed questions.
Yeah, so chargebacks are, I think, everyone's least favorite topic to really face and discuss. But quite simply, it's a transaction reversal that is initiated by the consumer or credit card holder with their credit card issuing bank. Really, the result is what's the big concern of that chargeback or transaction dispute. The result is that immediately that transaction is reversed and that money is given immediately back to the cardholder, while the merchant is left, with the decision on, is this something that they want or think that they can dispute and submit compelling evidence that's going to be overwhelming about the transaction, the validity, the authenticity, the delivery of services and solutions. Sure. And submitting that back to the bank that actually issued the card to the consumer for them to decide. So there's definitely a little bit of a weight against the merchants here, but that's what a chargeback is. And when we are looking at merchants and looking at industries, really what we're looking at is the vulnerabilities that a merchant has. What touch points does their business have? What kind of business model do they have? Are they primarily online? Are they primarily card present, card not present? What are their delivery controls? What is their fulfillment? All of those factors really start to build a profile of vulnerability. And so merchants that have various levels of vulnerability really need to start to address those vulnerabilities through, data, solutions, whatever it may be. So that's how we look at it. We don't necessarily look at it as just one industry, one model. We look at it very much as, what is your business model and how many vulnerabilities have you introduced into that business model through your touch points, through your transaction process and so forth.
Yeah. So, and I think just real quickly to recap that again, for our newer listeners that, are trying, wait a second, hold on. Let's back up a second.
All right. Sorry.
No, that was great. So the chargeback is, where that consumer, let's say I go in and I get my transmission fixed, or probably a more common thing would be I go buy a flat screen television at a little local, electronics store. And as a consumer, maybe I, what we call friendly fraud, right? Like maybe I say, well, I bet they didn't keep their receipts. I bet they didn't keep good records. So I'm going to call my bank and say, hey, I saw this charge 6 months ago for $800 for this flat screen TV. I never bought that. That wasn't me. Right. And then that initiates that chargeback. And I think what you're saying is, it's the merchant's kind of guilty until proven innocent. Right. So
exactly.
The money's taken from them. That's given to the bank holds it for the consumer. And then the bank is kind of saying to the merchant, show us proof that they did buy this flat screen TV and we'll give you your money back. Right. But if they can't show that proof, which a lot of times these smaller merchants don't do a good job of keeping records, then obviously they lose. They don't ever get that money back. Is that a pretty good?
That's a very high level, good summary right there. And unfortunately, you've got, as the merchant, you've got to know how that bank wants to see that information. Right, so there's this whole, black hole of information that you just don't know about as a merchant on, well, how do you put together that evidence that it's going to give you that best opportunity to win? So a lot of that really creates a pain point and a problem for merchants for sure. And the friendly fraud, we've seen it has definitely been a big issue there.
And you can't exactly go to the consumer's house and take a picture of the TV blaring in the living room.
No, social media helps with some of that, but unfortunately, you're not going to get candid video of them using it any other way for sure.
Right.
Right. And what you're saying also, Colin, just to drill down a little bit, is that it's not necessarily one particular industry or one particular delivery system. It's really a combination of factors that can contribute to chargebacks being a problem for merchants.
That's absolutely correct, Patty. It's really looking at what are those business policies, those touch points, how much control does that merchant have in the transaction process? And James, to your point, how much evidence or how much paperwork or paper trail or digital trail are they capturing along the way?
Right.
So where you are not getting that digital paper trail or whatever, you're introducing a vulnerability there.
Sure.
You need to have evidence that in fact that transaction happened every way possible if you can.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, it's very much a vulnerability game that needs to be looked at as layers in the business and how they deliver that good or service for sure.
Tell me though, are there external factors that have influenced? Like I've seen a lot of reports recently that particularly during the pandemic that chargebacks were increasing. And I'm just wondering, things like the pandemic, increased data breaches, that are, exposing people's records. Are those having an impact on chargeback volumes?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest impacts that I've seen is really about information available to the public on the chargeback process. We saw, especially with COVID and with the pandemic and with the shutdown of the travel and entertainment sector, well, a lot of flights, a lot of trips were booked, but a lot of those trip and hospitality providers wanted to push out all of those reservations and wanted to extend the reservations and say, well, maybe summertime 2020, maybe wintertime 2020, we'll be able to, fulfill this, but they weren't being very proactive with the refund policies right off of the bat. So what happens now, all of a sudden, there's a lot of influx of information around, well, you can use the chargeback policy and process as a way to get your money back if that business is not going to do it for you. So that really created, this opportunity for people to easily search, well, I'm at odds with this merchant. What are some ways that I can, get out of this situation and get my money back without, the headache of dealing with the merchant directly? So COVID absolutely created, a just perfect storm of information and opportunity that really blossomed the chargeback knowledge base to the public. And so now we're seeing it used more and more in a friendly fraud scenario. And that's really where we have a lot of the concerns for merchants, is just people leveraging the chargeback process for no good reason other than to get the money back. And data breaches are certainly another component, but data breaches are really going to drive more of a true fraud element. And when we're looking at chargebacks, true fraud is definitely something merchants face, but it's also something that merchants have an ability to really protect themselves from with some fraud prevention tools, again, reducing some of those vulnerabilities and openness to some of those attacks. But with friendly fraud, the real driver in a lot of the chargebacks that we see as a provider and in the payment space, those are the things that you really can't predict. We're not Minority Report. We can't predict what that human experience is going to be before they take that action. And so that's where it's really a concern in chargebacks, especially as a result of the pandemic.
Right. Colin, are you able to put a financial framework around chargebacks? I mean, obviously there's the cost of the goods, but I would imagine, there's time and potential legal expenses, et cetera. Could you maybe, for our audience, put a figure around that?
Absolutely. Very easily put. A chargeback is typically going to cost a merchant anywhere from 1.5 to 2 times that transaction value. And that's a very simple way that we see on average to calculate the cost of a chargeback, because you've got that cost of goods sold, you've got that inventory, you've got the overhead, and obviously your time to dispute that chargeback as well. So all those considerations really equate to a 1.5 to 2x, whatever that transaction is. So a $100 transaction is going to cost that merchant $250 if that transaction results in a chargeback. That's just the simple math. But when we look at it much deeper, we're looking at, what is again, going back to COVID, going back to some of those external factors, what are the trends that we're seeing today? And that's what's really concerning to us, is that merchants are facing a year-over-year increase in this chargeback vulnerability and chargeback revenue loss. And they're starting to see, 30% increase, 15 to 30% increases in chargeback loss year over year. And that's definitely looking at 2019, 2020 data. But that's, again, we haven't seen it stop. We're not out of this pandemic yet fully. So these are just continuing trends, and these are things merchants need to be aware of.
Yeah, that's actually quite shocking, 30%, especially as you say, that's based on 2019, 2020.
Right.
I mean, it's probably even higher than that given the pandemic.
Just organically, a merchant can probably expect somewhere from 5 to 10% year over year as their business grows. So that's just an underlying benchmark to keep in mind.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting as well. Colin, one thing that always surprises me about this when we talk about ISOs and agents is that they never talk about this when it's on the statement. It always kind of surprises me because, ultimately, and we'll get to the question in a second about, what you guys do. But the idea is, when we think about a chargeback, let's say we have a business, it's a bicycle shop, for instance, and, their average sale is, let's say, $200. And you go in and, they're currently paying maybe $800 a month in processing fees. And you say, well, I could save you, $50 a month is kind of the idea. Even if you go in with cash discounting and say, I can wipe it out, save you $800. Well, if they're getting 10 chargebacks a month, that's $2,000 that they're going to lose. If you don't know how to handle them properly. Right. And so the idea is when you come in and say, well, I see on your statement that last month you had, and, at my statement analysis company, we get, thousands of statements a month. And I mean, it's shocking the percentage of statements that actually do have at least one or two chargebacks on there. And you can see it right on the statement, It may not say the amount of the chargeback, but it'll say you had 2 or 3 or 4 chargebacks. And, bringing those up and saying, how much did you lose on these? That should be a huge red flag, and then being able to look at that. So I guess within the context of that, talk a little bit about this. I mean, why should ISOs and agents be interested in this topic? In your opinion, why should they be looking to sell this? Is this like, we're going to make money off of this? Is it more relationship play? Like, how do you see it playing out with your ISO partners?
Yeah. So for ISOs, it's definitely a opportunity to really service the client when you are doing that initial vetting, when you are looking at those statements for the first time. You're recognizing right there that they obviously have some underlying vulnerabilities to chargebacks. It's very simple. It's there on paper, like you said, James. And what chargebacks allow the ISO to do is really help that merchant prolong the life of their merchant account, prolong the life of their business, grow their business. And so chargebacks as a solution really is a win-win scenario for both the merchant and the ISO, because it's going to allow lifetime value of that merchant account. It's going to increase that lifetime value. Yeah, there are some revenue components there, but that's not why ISOs look to chargeback solutions. Right. Their primary core business is payments processing. They're looking at chargebacks as a complementary solution that's going to address the headaches and pain points that their merchants have expressed or that they've identified in their merchant base. And so it's really a way for ISOs to grow that concierge and consultative approach that many of them are taking now, because that's really setting them apart. That's what we see with the biggest ISOs, is that they are very much the trusted payments partner for their merchants. And when their merchants have a question, they come strictly to that ISO. Now, if that ISO can also guide them or help them with a chargeback solution or fraud solution, all of those components, now that relationship is much more sticky, and that ISO has, a customer for life, whether or not somebody else is going to compete at, percentage points. I mean, James, you and I were at SEAA. We look at, there were 600 people in a room in Florida at an event that were all competing with one another practically. So how does an ISO create a defining, divider, separator from themselves and their merchants compared to all those other ISOs that were in the room? It's really building that trust, having that end-to-end solution that they need to think about how they can do that for their merchants. And as a result, it's going to give them a much, larger piece of the pie, keep that piece of the pie for longer. And that's what really makes the biggest ISOs the best.
Yeah.
So that kind of dovetails with the question that I have, which is, there's Chargeback Gurus is not the only company out there with a chargeback solution. There are several companies out there, and I wanted to get a sense for how you work with ISOs and agents, and then maybe we can segue into what should an ISO look for in a chargeback solution provider.
Yeah, so, from Chargeback Guru's perspective, and you're right, Patty, we're not the only chargeback solution out there. But what's important is that ISOs need to identify the best chargeback solution for their merchants, for their particular scenario. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that involves, finding a partner that really matches well with their, solution service model. And again, like I said, a lot of ISOs like to be hands-on, like to be consultative, like to be a trusted partner to their merchants. So it's important to find a chargeback partner that is also a trusted partner for your merchants, so that there's not going to be that conflict of, let me introduce you to a chargeback solution. They're going to sell you on something and I'm going to, wipe my hands from it. ISOs that really want to be hands-on want a chargeback partner that's going to step in, act as a consultant, act as that ace up their sleeve with regards to chargeback, that subject matter expert that's really going to, support their business. And I think, that's certainly something that we focus on in our partner program, is really guiding and being a resource to support the ISO channel and ultimately provide what is, and this is just my personal opinion. Yes, I am an employee, but I've compared ourselves and I hear what our merchants say, but we are providing those merchants with dedicated guidance, dedicated direction to help their business. And that's what matters at the end of the day. That's how you succeed in business, is to really take that well-being at heart and do the best you possibly can. So yeah, I think it's important from an ISO that they absolutely need to find the best solution, because if it's all based on commission, if it's all based on how much revenue I'm going to get, that merchant is going to come and go very quickly. There's not any, real trust or relationship building that's taking place there. And it actually may, lose you in the end, much more so than a lesser commission that, lasts for longer.
So does Chargeback Guru then work directly with the merchant through the ISO? Is there a combination of working arrangements?
Absolutely a combination. There's the referrals, just to make it simple. If that's, there very little resource requests, very little, time and effort. But like I said, you've got that subject matter expert in your pocket when it needs to come out. Let's make an introduction. Let's get on a call. Let's get your pain points and objectives, overcome with a chargeback provider. Mm-hmm. Let's bring in Chargeback Gurus. Then you also have, of course, the white label. I want to be the only person to touch my merchants. Right. I'm the ISO. I don't want anybody else to talk to them. I want everything to go through me. That's also absolutely fine. There are about 4 or 5 different channels, programs, and blends that can work with every single scenario that we've encountered so far. And trust me, if there is a scenario that we haven't, we'll be happy to consider it and find the best solution to match it. But there's absolutely a method to work with ISOs in every capacity and partners in every capacity, not just ISOs, but we've got fraud tools, and we've got other providers that are working hand in hand with Chargeback Gurus. So there's going to be that extension or kickoff point that Chargeback Gurus is even providing to the ISO channel as well. Just as their merchants look to them as a trusted payment source, those ISOs and our partners can look to us as a trusted source as well, and we can guide them through some of the maze of fraud tools, friendly fraud, true fraud solutions as well. So that's how our partner program is really working. We can make it fit, and we want to also be that trusted provider to the partners.
If you were to, stand up and give a quick overview, the 2-minute elevator pitch, so to speak, how does Chargeback Gurus differentiate itself from other providers in this field?
So Chargeback Gurus is definitely driven to help merchants uncover the root causes of their chargebacks. I think that's something that's very unique.
Okay.
There's, of course, a lot of data that supports that, and it really helps merchants understand, what are their chargeback formulas, how many deals to chargebacks, their disputes, that kind of stuff. But what we're really doing that I think is unique is that we are a fully managed solution provider. Of course, we have a self-managed component if that's what a merchant desires. We are white glove, very hands-on, very dedicated to service. That's first and then there is always a reporting component that comes with that. So as we are doing our work, as we are enrolling in a solution, or as we're maybe helping them with a prevention of chargebacks, or the other side of the chargeback solution is the recovery of chargebacks once they've happened, the dispute. We're helping those merchants understand within their business policies, within their touch points on their merchants or on their customers, what touch points, what policies are driving chargebacks, because every chargeback tells a story, much like a bad Yelp review, if you were to think of it that way. As you start to address what is driving chargebacks, maybe it's a sales rep over promising, maybe it's a marketing campaign that's still buy one, get one free, but you get charged double. Maybe it's a customer service communication line that's not being answered in time. We're going to help those merchants uncover that knowledge. We're going to help them see the reporting and how they should really address low-hanging fruit in their own business, addressing some of those pieces, because that's going to tell us a story. You're going to address it. So as you address those things, you're going to reduce that chargeback vulnerability. Maybe it's improved communication, training, whatever. Now you've got improvements to the overall customer experience as a result, because you have addressed what's really driving chargebacks. So now your customer experience improves, your lifetime value improves, all of the acquisition costs, KPIs improve. So all of those metrics that merchants are really hyper focused on, those also see lift, while the chargebacks, the loss, and the vulnerabilities see a decline. That's what Chargeback Gurus is about. That's what we're trying to get to. We're really trying to help merchants understand, the full scale of their chargeback solution at a root cause base.
It's interesting. I think we spoke with Suresh maybe a year or two ago, right, James?
Yeah, about a year, year and a half.
Yeah, and he brought up an example that came into my head when you were talking just now, and it was about, some client that was having all these chargebacks, and it really was a fulfillment issue.
Yep.
And they went in and they said, hey, this is where you're messing up, and if you can fix this. And, that really surprised me, because, when I hear a lot about chargebacks, I think in terms of friendly fraud, but a lot of times it really is just miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got two sides. Your high-risk merchant may be facing a lot of friendly fraud. Your low-risk merchant, your enterprise merchant may just be facing some internal operation, deficiencies that really need to be improved. I remember week one when I got here, I went into a meeting just as a training session. I went into an insurance company that was selling Medicaid and Medicare policy, Part B plans. And they had a policy that said, if one of our partners sells that policy, well, then we will allow that partner the first right to win it back if it ever wants to cancel, right?
Okay.
So that partner was never, they weren't the merchant of record. The insurance provider was that had the partner. So any chargebacks were on the insurance company, not the partner. And the partner just kept getting commission checks because that account never got canceled. So there was no incentive for them to cancel the policy or really do what was right because there was just, no penalty for it.
Mhm.
Well, as we looked at our reporting, and this was the first real reporting session that we had with this client, we saw that their chargeback vulnerabilities were really tied to their affiliate partner sales network. They communicated to us that they had this policy, and overnight they reduced their chargeback loss by $80,000 a month.
Wow.
Simply by putting in a very easy operational difference to say, we're going to be the ones to manage the win back rate, not you.
Right.
Close the deal, thank you, but we're gonna actually keep these clients going, and we're gonna save a fortune in revenue loss. So real easy examples, and there are just so many of them that we can give of success stories like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this is really some great stuff, Colin. I'm sure there are folks out there that are going to want to find out some more about Chargeback Gurus. Where would you send them?
So I'd send them obviously to our website, chargebackgurus.com. Email me and the rest of the team here, partners at chargebackgurus.com. And like I said, we'll also be at a lot of shows now that those are starting up again. So it's great. So please look for us there. MWAA will be the next big one for us to attend. And that's my birthday weekend. So just just throwing that out there.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. It comes right after my birthday weekend, so we can celebrate together.
There you go.
Well, and my colleague who's traveling with us, it's also going to be their birthday weekend. So Patty,
Hey, we have a party in Chicago, dude.
Colin, thanks so much for jumping on with us today. Great information. I know our audience always enjoys. It's like, this is like the only podcast out there where there's all these listeners that are like, we're taking these really kind of boring technically, topics. And it's like, this stuff really matters. And I think hopefully our audience is going to take a lot of this information, reach out to you guys and work with you, but even at a higher level, just realize the importance of chargebacks as it relates to their merchant, relationship. So thank you very much for sharing the info.
Thank you as well. Yeah, it's a big, important topic that I hear about all the time from merchants. So anything that can help out the audience here, and Patty and James, thank you guys very much for including Chargeback Gurus and myself. So appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, Patty and I want to give a big shout out to Valor Paytech, which is the official sponsor of the Merchant Sales Podcast and the sponsor of this episode. If you're selling standalone terminals, especially cash discounting, you need a terminal provider that's built around cash discounting where the numbers make sense, everything adds up, and it's just done right. And I don't know about you, Patty, but I'm hearing a lot of things from agents of other terminals that are just simply not doing what they want.
Not doing the trick. Yeah. And the thing about Valor is that these are processor agnostic. So, it doesn't matter. You can just sell the terminal, get them up on cash discounting, and it doesn't matter who they're processing through. It's going to be so much of an easier sale than going in there and trying to sell them a specific terminal that's tied to a specific processor.
Absolutely. So if you haven't done so already, head over to ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR, ccsalespro.com/VALOR, and check it out.
And now, here is questions from the field with James Shepard.
So Patty, I just, right before we recorded this episode, had a great conversation with one of our 6-week Jumpstart participants and doing some one-on-one coaching. And she is trying to close quite a few large deals. And, she's not having trouble getting the decision maker. She's not having trouble getting them interested. She's not even having trouble really getting them to say, yes, we are interested in moving forward. But then she just is having a lot of trouble just getting it done. You know what I mean? Like, how do I just get this deal? I can't get the paperwork signed. I can't get it installed. I just can't get it over the finish line. It just seems like it keeps taking forever. And so I talked to her about the importance of storytelling in sales. And so when you're selling, you have to tell a compelling story about why things should move forward. So I'll give you an example. In her case, this particular merchant is a large company. She was trying to sell them cash discounting. They're currently doing Interchange Plus. And they have equipment now. It's an old FD 150 terminals that they use, and they want to switch to the new like tablets. So she's selling, I think it's Swipe Simple. And so she's offering like a Swipe Simple tablet with a, dongle on it that you can use for EMV or Swipe. And she can do cash discount or traditional processing. I said, look, why don't you go in there and say, as I'm sure you're aware, the supply chain, especially for electronics, is a disaster right now.
Right.
But before I came to this meeting today, I did confirm with my team that we do have enough hardware available for you right now that we can move forward. So before I leave today, the only thing I want to do is I do want to make sure we get this equipment order in. Now, if you'd rather just go with it, traditional processing like you have now, if you're more comfortable with that for right now, that's fine. We can always switch to the cash discount down the road. But the most important thing is we need to get that equipment order in today. And so let's get this paperwork filled out. But did you want to go with traditional, or do you want to go ahead and give the cash discounting a shot? That's a compelling story. That's going to get that merchant to say, oh, wow, I need to move forward, right? So, maybe it's equipment supply. Maybe it's a manufactured, discount. I was telling her a story about, my first sales job. I was selling lawn care for TruGreen. I was like 19 years old, and they had twice a year, they had this thing they called Sell-a-thon. So Sell-a-thon was this one day, it was a Saturday. Everybody came into the office, and at the, right at the beginning of the day, they would give us all this sheet that said, here's the prices for today, the special prices for today. It was usually a 30-35% discount on lawn care services for the first year. Well, we would all year be selling people, and they would want a discount, and we would say, I'm sorry, we don't discount. And if we couldn't sell them, we'd say, now we do have one day a year that we discount. It's Sell-a-thon. Can I call you back on that day and, try to sell you? And, we would make a lot of sales that day, obviously. But ultimately, it's not that they couldn't give a discount on a different day. That's a story. They're telling a story. They're creating a narrative. And when I started my own company, I very quickly realized, I was like, man, I'm my own company now. I have to create my own narrative.
Right.
And so I did. And so every month, even on a weekly basis or a per client basis, I would figure out what is my company's pricing policy relative to this situation. And I would create a compelling story. I'd go in and say, hey, I've got great news. This month, I'm offering this. And so this special offer ends July 1st. Sometimes I would bring, one of my favorite ones is I would bring either 100 or even $500. It was like a marketing piece, like a third piece, 1/3 of a piece of paper. And it would look like $100 bill.
Right.
And I brought it on one side, it was a $100 bill. On the other side, it was kind of my marketing piece. And I would hand it to them and say, any new clients that sign up, as soon as we get the paperwork done, submitted and approved, I will give you a $100 Visa gift card just as a thank you for being a new client of mine. And that's something I'm doing through July 1st, or whatever it is. Could be free equipment. It could be any number of things. But if you think you're going to go in and close, especially a larger deal, and you're not going to create that narrative, it's going to take you forever. It's your job as the salesperson to infuse the urgency into that situation by sharing a compelling narrative, a compelling story that gets your point across that, hey, if we're going to move forward, we need to do it now. And then the final tip I gave her was I said, you need to shift your mindset. And so the mindset of the salesperson, a lot of people talk about the patient salesperson. I agree, but disagree with that. So yes, good salespeople are patient, meaning they have a long-term view of their success.
Sure.
So they understand it takes a while. Okay. But with individual accounts, I like not very patient. So the idea there is either you're part of my sales pipeline or you're not. So I'll give you a really good example. And we deal with large clients all the time with our ISO AMP business, which is our statement analysis company. We have at any given time, I probably have 6 or 7, well-known brands that have, more than 200 salespeople that are evaluating our statement analysis service, right? And we sign up 1 or 2 of them a month. These are very long sales cycles. Well, what I do is very simple on that side of the business. I give it to them for free initially, and say, hey, just use it, try it out, take 3 or 4 of your reps, go in there, use it, right? And then we wait until we have a good rationale, a good story, a good, narrative of some kind to move forward with that deal. Maybe it's them reaching out, whatever it is. But to me, then once they reach out, and then it's like, okay, you're ready to talk seriously about doing this. Let's do it.
Right.
Let's talk and let's do it.
Right. You've had a chance to use it. You
Right.
know how good it is. So
Yeah.
let's move.
Let's go.
Right.
And if you don't want to go right now, I'm very patient, meaning if you would like me to ignore you, I will ignore you for a while because I have other people I'm trying to sell.
Right.
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 But if you mean patient as in I'm going to waste my time with lots and lots and lots of endless meetings to no purpose, no, I'm not patient at all. If you want to try it out and you want me to ignore you for a while, I'm more than happy to do that. But if we're going to be part of a sales process, let's go because I'm busy and I have other things to do.
Right. Right.
And so salespeople need to get themselves in that same mindset when you're talking to a merchant of, again, going back to the narrative, putting these all together. You could say, look, Susan, the truth is, I'm just being honest with you, there is a big supply chain issue right now, especially when it comes to electronics. Look it up. You'll see, this is across the board, semiconductors. I mean, this is a big issue in a lot of industries.
A lot of industries, sure.
Right now, our company, if this is your case, you could say right now, our company does have a good supply of hardware for the next 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening is we have a lot of businesses that are looking to us right now because they need to upgrade hardware and we have it. How long we're going to have it, I don't know. But what I want to find out from you is this something you're seriously considering now that you'd like to move forward with? Or do you want me to not worry about this now and we can check back later on down the road when we have a supply of equipment again?
Right.
Right. So the idea is I'll be patient. I'm fine to talk with you in, 3-6 months. I don't care. I have a lot of other people I'm selling. But if you want to move forward, let's go because I have the equipment right now. So we're giving that narrative. So again, there's so many variations of that. It depends so much on the size of the merchant, the type of the merchant, the sales process, the decision maker. But ultimately, as a salesperson, one of your most important jobs is crafting a compelling story and narrative for that specific account that's going to resonate with them and it's going to get them to take action and feel that there's some urgency to it.
So it's more like, so you're selling by telling. Yes. But it's by telling something that's of import.
Yeah, you've got to get their mindset wrapped around what is the logic for them? Why should they move forward now versus waiting until later? Yeah. If you haven't given them a compelling reason, understand the opportunity cost here. These are busy people. They have, you're like, well, I don't know what their problem is. This big company, I could save them $1,000 a month. Do you not understand? Like, I don't think our industry really gets it. Like $1,000 a month for a big company. Okay. For my company personally, $1,000 a month to me is, I don't want to say meaningless because it's money is money. But I mean, I have employees, lots of employees that I pay $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month to. So you're going to save me 1/6 of one of my many employees. I mean, sure, I would love to, but ultimately I have a lot of other things going on. I have a lot of opportunities I'm pursuing. I have a lot of things to do with my time. And so, the question is, in the time it would take me to save $1,000 a month with this vendor, could I have instead focused on making $5,000 a month in additional revenue on the other side of my business? And so that's how these business owners are thinking. And so when you go in there and you're like, well, I'm just going to let the savings do the work. I'm saving you $1,000 a month. They'll make a decision. No, they won't.
No.
You have to give them a compelling narrative. Now, if somebody came to me and said, I can save you $1,000 a month right now, but if you wait 30 days, you're not going to be able to save that $1,000 a month. Well, okay, if I believe you, you've definitely got my attention now. If I realize I'm not going to be able to take advantage of this $1,000 opportunity again, okay, all right, fine. But if you're just saying, hey, whenever you want, you can save $1,000 a month, let's talk next month. I'm busy.
Right.
So I think it would be helpful for agents in our industry to kind of wrap their mind around that mindset and that, an understanding, and then weave a narrative that's going to get people like me off the fence and making decisions, even though we are busy and even though there's a lot of other opportunities on our plate.
Yeah. Good insights, James. Thanks.
Buddy.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
Well, folks, here's a stat that I think might have some people scratching their heads. Fewer than half of fuel stations with pay at pump were EMV compliant as of mid-April, when the deadline for bringing those pumps into compliance took effect. ACI Worldwide surveyed 45,000 gas stations nationwide, including those owned by major oil companies, grocers, and convenience stores, and found that just 48%, and they did this in like mid-April, so like days before the deadline took effect.
Yeah.
And they found just 48% were ready for EMV compliance deadline with respect to these automated fuel dispensers.
Wow.
And drilling down, they found that 26% have upgraded better than 3/4 of their AFDs. 22% have upgraded less than a half, and 50% of those that are not fully compliant aren't sure when they will be.
Wow.
Now, I got to tell a little aside story here. I was, as we've discussed in the past, I live out in the middle of nowhere, and there's this little country store, maybe 5 miles from here, with a couple gas pumps.
Yeah.
And so I was over there the other day, and I noticed that they're digging up all the pumps. So I said, "Oh, you guys are going with you're putting EMV compliant pumps in." And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "The new security procedure for card payments. You're putting those new pumps in, right?" He's like, "Oh no, we're just putting new tanks in."
Wow.
Wow. And I thought, man, if I was selling fuel stations,
Yeah.
those are the
Yeah.
kind of places I'd be going to right now. Because they're spending a fortune putting new tanks in, right?
Absolutely. And might as well go ahead and fix the pumps while they're at it.
Right? It's
know?
like, yeah, yeah. So, obviously, the pandemic had an impact on lack of preparedness,
Sure.
the financial strain.
Sure.
But the fact remains, like this little gas station in Wolfsville, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of gas stations that are now prime targets for fraudsters.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I mean, I almost, it's interesting, actually. I would even push back a little bit on the assumption that the pandemic made it worse. I mean, when we think about it, actually, gas stations are one of the only business types that remain
That
normal
actually
operation.
remained open, right?
And they got
Yes.
Paycheck Protection Program money, and they had
EIDL loans and all
yeah,
that
I
kind
mean,
of stuff.
really, they're probably in a better cash position than they've been in years. And
Right.
I really believe that it's primarily a lack of understanding on their part to understand, number one, what happens when they're not compliant.
Right.
And number two, how inexpensive it is to actually fix it.
Yeah, because these guys are going to be financially on the hook. I mean, there was no
Yeah.
extension this year, despite some people wanting it, and I think these small merchants are going to be really hurt. Like I said, I actually found myself trying to explain to this guy what EMV was and why his pumps should really do that.
Yeah.
And he just kind of blew me off, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
but
Well, he'll be wanting to talk to you again in a couple of years or a
maybe
year when he sees.
yeah,
So
when he sees that stuff coming back.
maybe it'd be beneficial for our audience to actually explain, what does happen. Like, it was funny. You mentioned this just yesterday. I was watching a show on HBO Max about fraud. They had a thing about scams and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so interesting because they were talking about credit cards. They were interviewing scammers that had actually, that do this.
That do this,
And
yeah.
they were showing like literally these machines where they can, like, in the back of a car, they have a machine that's printing credit cards.
Yeah.
So they go on the dark web, they get your credit card number, they print a card. Well, if you're a gas station and somebody goes in and they swipe that card and they fill up their gas tank and then they fill up another one and they go bop around and they do this. Well, if your pump was EMV compliant, that fraud would not have been possible because
Right.
it would have said this is a chip card and it needs to have a chip, but it didn't. But your pump didn't recognize that because it doesn't allow those chip cards.
Right.
So however much gas they bought in the past, like before this deadline, that fraud that was covered by either the card brands or the bank.
Right.
But
By
now
the
because-
issuing bank, right?
The issuing bank, right?
Right.
But now because that fraud is totally the merchant's fault and it could have been avoided with EMV as of the deadline, now they're just going to put that right back on the gas station and say, hey, you had $1,000 in fraud last month. That's your problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and the thing is, I mean, I go online every once in a while. In fact, just prepping for this insider's report, I just did a quick scan, gas pump skimmers,
Yes.
and they're, I mean, North Dakota, New York, Maine, Florida, California, there's all these rings they keep busting. And
Yep.
if they're busting these rings, there's plenty that they're not busting.
Right. What is a skimmer for those that maybe don't know?
Okay, so what it is, it's a little device that can be put inside the terminal, that literally captures the card number and then transmits it to, usually there's a transmitter they keep nearby that collects all these card numbers.
Right.
So when I go into my if I was to go to that gas station
Right.
and run the card through, if there was a skimmer on there, it would capture all the mag stripe information that they need to create a bogus account.
Yep.
And or sell that number or sell that card on the dark web.
Right.
And the thing that surprises me, I mean, these things are so tiny. I mean, I actually, I got hit by a ATM skimmer one time, and and it was interesting because I actually went to my bank and they were like, "Oh yeah, we found that skimmer in this ATM, and the camera was across the street." Because I said, "How'd they get my PIN number?" They had a camera across the street that could photograph you keying in your PIN.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then
Now,
they timestamp that along with the skimmer.
yeah. And then they
Wow.
know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's crazy. So for ATMs, I mean, that's really difficult because they're getting your PIN and your account information.
Right.
you
And there's
know-
no chargebacks on PIN debit. So
No, right. And so then if you're doing, at the gas station, you're using your debit card. I mean, I tell all my friends, don't use your debit card. Don't use your DDA debit card at a gas station
Right.
if you're going to swipe, because that you might as
Right.
well just say goodbye to your money.
yeah.
It amazes me how many news articles in local newspapers and television stations that I see about skimmers
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to also throw out a couple of additional data points that came out of the ACI survey
Mhm.
that I referenced in the beginning, which I thought was very interesting. 91% of fuel stations plan to implement contactless, and 78% are considering mobile.
Wow. And yet they don't even really know what EMV is right now. Isn't that
Right?
interesting?
Isn't that
Right.
interesting? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that those data points,
Yeah.
coupled with their lack of understanding of EMV,
Yeah.
really.
Well, and maybe, and it's interesting. I mean, maybe the one will drive the other, maybe the fuel stations, as they have more of an interest in mobile payments and contactless, and they're going to realize they have to upgrade their pump for that. And
Right.
maybe they'll be like, oh,
Maybe
I guess
then,
we also-
okay, yeah, I guess we'll do that
Yeah.
chip thing. Yeah.
I guess it's a good data point for those in our audience that are trying to sell gas stations, that, if your solution, if you're using like a, was it IDT with their,
Right.
one that we interviewed, and Sound Payments and a few others. So maybe if you're selling gas stations, talking to them about contactless, maybe that's like a better lead in, even in the EMV, even though the EMV deadline is more urgent.
Right.
It sounds like maybe they're more interested in learning about how to accept contactless and mobile payments.
And I think, we've seen so much emphasis on contactless over the past year.
Yes.
I mean, it's just been, I was
Yeah.
thinking about this the other day, James, and I don't want to meander too far off the topic, but, I've been covering payments for almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
And everything has always been so slow. I remember when they went from the knuckle busters to,
Yes.
online auth. I mean, God, you would think that was never going to end, the migration.
Yes. Yes.
And to see contactless in the last couple years just eclipse any other adoption in the payment space has just blown my mind.
Yeah.
And especially, as we both know, I'm older. I'm a baby boomer. I love contactless. I mean, I have one contactless card now, and that's all I use. Waiting
Yeah.
for the others to issue.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. It has taken off. I mean, it's interesting to me. I feel like obviously COVID has really, advanced it in a crazy way.
Mhm.
And I think it's taken off. I mean, I think I was just having actually a debate on LinkedIn right before this with somebody on my profile was posting about, I was actually posting about that surcharge,
Mhm.
thing that we'll talk about in a couple weeks, in Colorado. And, I always get the person who's not the industry person. They're
Right.
entrepreneur coach or whatever.
Right.
And he's posting in there and saying, your whole industry is just totally predicated on this crazy idea because the cost of moving money is zero. And so eventually, merchants know it, consumers know it, whatever. And, and it's like, it's just so dumb, and you just, it's so frustrating that people just don't, they don't get it. And I said, yeah, well, I guess that's why all major merchants and consumers today are using Bitcoin.
Yeah.
No, they're not. Like, it's like things take time. There's an
Right.
evolution and the adoption. It's like you look at contactless and it's like, wow, that's just taken off like a rocket ship relative to other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 50% though.
No,
It's, you know what I mean? What is it? 15% or something. I mean, it's
a little closer to 20 these days, but still, yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, it's getting in 3 years, getting to 15% is like an amazing rate of change.
Right.
And so people are, Bitcoin acceptance is, it's like, well, yeah, maybe in 10 years, that'll be at 15, 20%. Like it takes a long time for these things to happen in the payment space. It's a very complicated ecosystem, and
it's a very complicated ecosystem, and it is not a zero cost.
No, it's not a zero cost at all. So what I put on there, I said, everything is ultimately zero cost, but you've got to have technology and services in order to enable the transaction of anything, whether it's payments or goods or anything else. You have to be able to facilitate the transaction. So, but yeah, I think it's super interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how these trends kind of play out moving forward.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Patty.
Thanks, James.
This episode of the Merchant Sales Podcast was brought to you by Valor Paytech, the technology company that is revolutionizing cash discounting and surcharging with innovative features like dual mid support, waive the fee options, and even adding non-cash adjustment charges to tips. Now, all of this is made possible by a variety of technology devices and solutions such as gateways, tabletop point of sale devices, and features like SMS text messaging and e-invoicing, all with cash discounting in mind. Valor Paytech, bold ideas, smart execution. Make sure you head over to ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR, ccsalespro.com/Valor, VALOR. Schedule your free demo today and watch videos and learn more about this amazing technology solution.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.